This is the Rush Discuss, where the discuss is Rush. Welcome to this week's discussion on the Rush Discuss. This is week 5 out of 9 pairings for the least popular bracket. We only had 4 pairings for the most popular, but I feel like there are a lot more songs that people hate on that deserve to be talked about for this least popular bracket.
I think as Rush fans, we're kind of used to most people not liking most of what we like and listen to, because most people either haven't heard of Rush or brush them off. So today we're going to dive into the Big Wheel versus Good News First. It was really weird listening to both of these. I didn't realize that one of the common denominators between these two would be the type and amount of vocal processing there was on both of these, because both of these have very similar vocal effects put on it. Try to put it into language that non-audio engineers will understand. Yes, please.
Because it's not all reverb. There's some delay in there as well, but there are a lot of things going on with the vocals that when you really listen to it, you'll hear right away. It's not hard to find, but I just thought it was interesting that both of them had very similar types of sounds on the vocals. And they both kind of did this thing where they started off in the intros with the kind of in-between music. I'm not really putting that into great words, but it's like going into the verse, it's a completely different sound than what they did in the intro. And then the sound that they started with comes back later as kind of like an interlude. And so I just thought that was kind of cool that there were these similarities between the two.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see what ends up being paired just arbitrarily. Not so arbitrarily, but just how when you paired these months ago, you didn't think probably so much about it, and then you get them together and you're like, wow, this is an interesting pairing. Actually, with this pairing, I've been punching Adam in the arm because I'm angry, because I love both of these very much, and putting them head to head is really difficult for me today. So thank you for that, Adam.
You're welcome. So let's just dive right into the Big Wheel with this intro. And this is from Roll the Bones. All right. Now, the first time I ever heard this song, because remember, the first time I heard the album Roll the Bones, I didn't like it, and it took a while for me to get into. And so this song was no different. I at first was really turned off by the sound of it. I think one of the big reasons was because Alex's guitar was a lot more simple than what I was used to from him. And it had a lot of just the, stereotypical type guitar stuff where it's just big open chords, chords that you learn when you're first getting started on the guitar, just switching between those simple chords, and then just kind of that double stop playing, kind of eighth notes going, kind of that blues feel. And for whatever reason, that was a big turnoff for me. So I just kind of ignored this song for a little bit. But then when I actually started listening, it all just clicked and it made sense. And I love this song now. This is probably one of my favorite songs, not just on this album, but of any song, not even just out of Rush. So some things that I think that other people might think about why this song is not as popular. Going along with what I said about Alex's guitar, I think the lyrics come across as if they are a little bit more simple than what Neil normally does. And oh, he's talking about love. Oh, it's always cringy when he does that. But whatever people think, whatever they prefer, it's up to them. But I think those are weak arguments against this song. The thing that really sold me on Alex's guitar approach in this song was paying more attention to the overall theme of the song and with the lyrics. And it's all kind of mirroring that youthful look on the world. So there is kind of a simplicity about the song that kind of reflects what the lyrics are talking about. And I think it just works really well.
Yeah, I really enjoy this song quite a bit. I don't know, it's almost like, it's not like Geddy's voice is silly, but he's being like playful with his pronunciations and the way that he's singing it. I just find it catchy and entertaining to listen to, and have always really liked this song ever since I heard it. As you might remember, I definitely took this to this album immediately, unlike Adam, who it was more of a slow burn. I love Roll the Bones. I love every single track. I could listen to the entire album straight through over and over. And so this is just, I love this track as well. And part of it, there's a particular line in this song that every time it plays, I'm always like, man, that line is awesome. The line that says, "I was lined up for glory, but the ticket sold out in advance." I thought that line was awesome the first time I ever heard it, and the way that Geddy's almost like rhythmic in the way that he's almost speaking it. I love that part.
Yeah, so many great moments in this song like that. Yet again, because we're in Roll the Bones, it's got kind of that gambling undertone. And with the theme of this song, I think it fits really well that a lot of life just seems like it's a spin on the big wheel and you just see where it lands. But I also like the talk about faith and fate and choosing your own destiny, because those are all themes that Neil plays into a lot. Yeah, and I'll just read the first couple stanzas in these lyrics. Well, I was only a kid, didn't know enough to be afraid. Playing the game, but not the way the big boys played. Nothing to lose, maybe I had something to trade, the way the big wheel spins. Well, I was only a kid on a holy crusade. I placed no trust in a faith that was ready-made. Take no chances on paradise delayed, so I do a slow fade. And I just love that. I love that thought, that we shouldn't just take things as they're prepackaged for us as we grow up. Obviously, as we grow up, we all lean on whatever our parents' beliefs are. But at some point, we need to take stock of those beliefs, and we have to do our own research, do our own study, and come to our own conclusions, which after we do that, we may end up still choosing what our parents believed, but at least we've chosen for ourselves. And I love that line, placed no trust in a faith that was ready-made. And then the thought coming right after, take no chances on paradise delayed, which I think is really, I think a lot of people with faith don't realize that they're doing this, but that they're kind of living life, keeping themselves from doing things that would make them happy because they think, well, I've got my promised paradise to come, so I can go ahead and just forego things that would make me happy in the now because that's not true happiness. And there is an element of truth to that. There are definitely things that it's better to give up now because it will be better later. But so Juliann and I are people of faith. We believe in Christ and we do live our life after that manner. But we also don't believe that all the good things to come are coming after this life. We believe that God intends us to find joy in the now, that he intends us to live life as fully as we can as humans because he created us as humans, which we are designed to have joy. And so I think a lot of our beliefs really line up with what Neil is professing, even though he himself did not believe in Christianity or any sort of religion. But he does talk about in his books how he is spiritual, and he does think that there are elements in the universe that we don't understand. But I think that that concept is true and important, that there are things in this life that we should just go out and experience. We don't need to limit ourselves, because often people in a religious context will tell others that, oh, you have to forgo such and such because you just have to, and you just have to take our word for it. And then don't worry, it'll all come out better on the other side. But I think that we are meant to flourish in this life, and we're meant to experience things in this life. And it's up to us individually to find out what those things are and to work it all out with ourselves. And if you believe in God, work it out with God. But it's an individual thing. And don't hold yourself back just because you think that the best is going to come later, which I believe that the best will come later, but I don't think that that means that we have to restrict ourselves now and just live a horrible humdrum life and just repress ourselves just because we think that the best is yet to come. I think that we have better than we sometimes give ourselves license to feel in this life.
Amen. Talk about a really deep and reflective conversation coming from a song that may seem light or silly or annoying or whatever to the audience that doesn't prefer this song, but it really is quite deep and quite an important topic in this song. And I think it's making the decision harder because having heard all of that and digging even deeper into this song, it makes me like it even more than I already did. So thank you again, Adam.
So before we move on to good news first, I just want to say, I don't know if you'd call it the bridge of the song, but functionally it's more or less a bridge. With the wheel goes round, landing on a twist of faith, that part, that to me, I think is always kind of the weakest part of the song.
I love that part. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't dislike it. I just think it's the weakest part of the song.
Okay, I can see what you're saying. It's not that it's weak, but it's not as strong as the other parts.
Yeah, it kind of just, it feels a little too separated from the rest of the song, in my opinion, because obviously this is all subjective. But I think that the chorus more than makes up for it, because this is probably one of my most favorite choruses of all time of any song.
Yeah, I absolutely love the chorus too. It's so wonderful. Just,
oh my gosh, it's so good.
Again, the name of this podcast would really be, oh, it's just so good. That's pretty much what we say all the time.
All right. Now to good news first. This is from Snakes and Arrows.
What a line to start out with. The best we could agree on is that it could have been worse.
Yeah, this album is all more doom and gloom than what sometimes the music gives off of.
Well, I feel like this is way heavier and more, metal-y. Is that a musical term? The mood that Alex is setting with his riff that he wrote, it's heavy. It kind of matches what's going on in these first few lines.
This is kind of a despair song with some here's how to make it better thrown in, which I think it's important. I think it's important to look at those aspects of life. Look at, okay, you're in a crappy situation. How do you flip this so that it's not as terrible? And I just love that thought of just tell me the good news first. If life is going to suck sometimes, then why postpone the good stuff? Just give it to me first, because I already know that there's something bad coming.
Yeah, what a cheery outlook on life. I always joke that if you've been listening to us before, you know that I didn't get into Rush until 2019, and at that point I was 28. I was not young. I mean, young as in I wasn't a child like Adam was listening to this, and I always joke that, oh my gosh, if I had really gotten into Rush when I was a teenager, I would have been obsessed. I would have been so obsessed. And I feel like Good News First would have especially fit into my mood as a teenager of It Could Have Been Worse, and how it's dark and gloomy, and like that was what I liked listening to. And so I feel like it would have fit perfectly into past me musical tastes. And so I think that's another reason why I like it so much now, is because it's like, it almost feels like home. Like, yeah, this is the stuff that I like listening to, like that despair feeling kind of, but with hope. And so that's something that I like about this song, and what's drawn me towards it more, and just the whole message of it too.
Yeah, the line that I think sums it up for me is, but I still get this feeling there's more trouble ahead. So never mind the bad news. Let's have the good news instead. And I think that is a great way to approach things in life sometimes, because sometimes you're not feeling all the balanced approach. You're not feeling things will look up sooner or later, and you're not feeling very optimistic.
Sometimes it just sucks.
But like it says, do me that favor and tell me the good news first. And I think sometimes in like the news, especially, it gets so caught up in just telling bad news over and over and over. It's like, we know things are bad. Just give us some good news. And I think sometimes that's how you have to approach life. Acknowledge that, yes, there is a lot of bad news. So if you could just give me some good news, that'll give me enough to get on through the rest of the bad news.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with that, especially with social media these days. It's just constant bombardment with negative and bad news from a lot of people, and good news from a lot of people too. And so it can feel like very overwhelming. And so, focusing on, well, what's something that is good news? There's one particular part of this song that I could listen to over and over, just that section. I guess functionally this would be the bridge as well. Some would say they never fear a thing. Well, I do.
Well, I do.
Exactly. The echo pit is, it's infectious. I love that part a lot.
It's one of those things that when it happens, you're almost like, well, that was an obvious choice. But then it's like, well, yeah, it was obvious because it's so good.
And it works so well. It's like the perfect time to be obvious. And Rush is not often obvious. So when they are obvious, it's like done right.
Now, for some of the things that I think that people don't like about this song.
How could they not like anything about this song? That's all I have to say.
But from some of the stuff that I've seen, and I can get behind a little bit, just because this was another song that took a little bit. It was a slower burn for me from this album.
Not me.
Yeah, this is an album that I took to immediately, but I did find that the top half of this album I listened to a lot more often than the back half of it. And I think that's what made it so that I didn't click on this song as quickly.
It's so funny how we do that with so many albums, where you listen to like the first two songs, you're like, yeah, this is great. And then you like never listen to the last track. And then you're like, wait, have I heard this song? I mean, not for Rush for me. I listen to straight albums like all the time, but it is funny how we do that.
Yeah, but with this song, I can see where Geddy's voice would be a turnoff in this song, because he's experimenting a little bit more with it's not that it's a moving melody. The melody isn't moving as much. He's just messing with the almost blues ornamentation on the melody. So there's a lot of sliding and a lot of imprecision that's deliberate, if that makes any sense. He's deliberately not staying on a specific tone, and he's letting himself kind of be squishy around it.
Squishy, that's the
completely technical term right there.
Yeah, actually that's what I love about it. So, but I can see why people wouldn't. But other than that, I honestly cannot see why they wouldn't like it. I just can't. That's very, very elegant way of saying that.
Well, it's interesting because sometimes there are those things that it is just a single thing, but that can be your absolute deal breaker. And I guess for some people, Getty's, quote, whiny voice on this can be a deal breaker.
I never thought of it as whiny. That's really funny. Do people say that?
There's some people I've seen where they think it's too nasally or too whiny or too whatever, but it's like, this is Geddy Lee. Complaints about his voice are not new.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing. Complaints about Geddy's voice are not new. That's mostly what I hear when people say, oh, I hate Rush. I hate that voice. Like, you can't even understand him. And then obviously you get to the point where you can, and that you appreciate every stage of his voice because it changes over time. And I really love both of these songs, the way that his voice is in both of these songs, the way he's playing with it and ornamenting it. And I think it makes them more interesting. I think it adds to these tracks more than takes away.
I think another interesting aspect about this song is just the wailing on the drums that Neil is giving throughout this whole performance. Because obviously he's not a soft player by any stretch of the imagination. But this song in particular, I just feel like he's really just pounding away. And there are some fills that they're just are so precise and neatly packaged into the bar that he's filling. And it's just so clean. It's just such a treat to listen to, because I feel like it just adds that kind of undercurrent of, in some ways, uneasiness to the song, because some of those fills get a lot more busy than what he's already been doing on the drums. It's just pretty cool to me to listen to how the drums really add to the song in this track.
So how on earth do we come to a decision with this? I don't even know where to begin. Can we please for once have a tie?
No ties. No. I can just say the one that I'm leaning towards.
Oh, okay. Let's start there because I do not have any idea.
So the one that I'm leaning towards is the big wheel. But yes, it was a very difficult decision to get there, because I think objectively speaking, if you're just going with technicality and depth of lyrics and whatever other metric that you can be objective about, I think Good News First is a better song in those regards. But that is only because it comes so much later in the catalog. Because of course, musically is going to be more complex. Of course, lyrically is going to have more layers, because this is from an album that comes as the band is much older and have so much more experience. And so if we were just going to talk about objectively what things were better, it would consistently, anything from the last few albums would have to win out with just about anything. But I just have to always remember that this is a very subjective discussion, a very subjective project that we're doing here. And so subjectively, I'm more drawn to keeping the big wheel because of that youthful approach to the theme that it sets forth, and to my favorite chorus out of the two, and how much I just love that chorus.
This is awkward. Because I really, really want to choose Good News First. I don't know if I can live without the, well, I do. That bridge, it's just too good. And I love the feeling of this song and the message and the heaviness, and I just vibe with it so much. And I also do love the big wheel though, but I really want to choose Good News First just because I feel like I would be more sad not to listen to that one again. But I feel like the same way with the big wheel. So you know what? Just ignore everything I just said because I don't know anymore.
So with the Good News First, I do love those, almost the abandon that Alex is playing with. He just has these huge surging guitar hits and just kind of, he's almost kind of mirroring Geddy's imprecision. Like he's sliding up into his chords and sliding away from them, and just kind of, because he's got a lot of heavy distortion and overdrive on his guitar, just every time he slides or is like giving string noise and changing chords, it just gives you this kind of like and it just adds more to the texture. And so they're creating this world that you're living in Good News First. And yeah, I'd be sad not to listen to it ever again. But I think for me, Good News First just hits more on the nostalgia button for me as well. Not that I listened to it a lot when I was younger, because I can't remember the first time I listened to Roll the Bones. But
You mean the big wheel hits the nostalgia button?
yeah.
You said Good News First.
Oh, my apologies. I meant to say the big wheel hits on the nostalgia button more than Good News First does. And like I was saying, not that I listened to Roll the Bones much when I was young enough for it to really have nostalgia from listening to it when I was young. But I don't know, it puts me in the mind of that time in your life where you're discovering things, you're discovering how to think for yourself, which is something I don't think we realize that we're doing while we're doing it. But looking back, you can kind of start understanding the process where you're leaving what your parents are saying and what the authority figures in your life are saying, and you're starting to put things together for yourself and discovering who you are and what you believe. And so that song, that theme hits on those kind of memories, and so in that way it becomes nostalgic.
I see what you're saying. It's still having a hard time letting go of wanting to choose Good News First, though. And just that line, so do me that favor and tell me the good news first. I just connect with this song so deeply, and I have no idea what argument to make right now, other than I just really want to choose Good News First. That seems very boring and not interesting of a reason, other than it just hits something deep in my soul and deep in my feeling whenever I listen to Good News First. And almost a weird reason, like it's almost like what you said, the nostalgia factor of the big wheel for you. It's like the nostalgia factor for the Good News First for me of that kind of music that I would grow up listening to. And so it's really hard. I really want to choose Good News First. I feel like this is the first time. Well, this is not the first time we've disagreed this much, but I want to be stubborn.
You've told me about exactly what you were talking about, going through being a teenager and listening to a lot of music that would get you into that headspace of kind of doom and gloom almost, and just kind of, that was your way to cope with kind of that time period that it brings me back to with the big wheel, because that was your time of discovering who you are, but also trying to find your place in the world and having to really try to understand the good and the bad in the world. Because, you know, as a teenager, that's the first time that you really have an inkling of what is out there in the world. It's the first time that you really begin to see that there is a potential for the bad news to never let up. And so, especially for you, music being what you were doing in high school, music then became another outlet for you in that self-discovery process. So I can see where you're coming from with this song, and just thinking about the way that Good News First is such a mature take on a lot of the same themes as in the Big Wheel, which I had never really thought about putting those two together thematically because it just seems so different. But I think it kind of gets at that same root feeling of almost feeling displaced for a little bit, but just kind of coming at that feeling from different viewpoints.
So does it get us closer to a decision? I don't know. We're both pretty set on our decisions.
Well, I don't know about that because walking through and thinking about what you've told me about your teenage experience and this stuff that you were listening to and relating it back to this song and how that touches on that nerve, I think thinking through those things and really being able to put these two songs side by side in that regard as far as what it triggers in both of us in that feeling, I think there is a deeper feeling that it touches on in Good News First. And so as much as I absolutely love as much as I absolutely love the Big Wheel.
Which I do too. I do love the Big Wheel.
And like it would kill me to never hear that chorus again. Like I would be devastated. But I think Good News First has a lot more layers that you can continue to dig through over time, musically and lyrically. And like I said before, this isn't necessarily just being an objective decision, but I think subjectively for me, thinking about it more, I would prefer to have Good News First to listen to over and over just because there is such depth to the lyrics that I can continue digging from. Whereas I feel like in a lot of ways, because the Big Wheel is a simpler take on a simpler time, and that's what it's going for, I think because these two songs are so close, I think that's what edges it out for me in coming over to your side of things, is because I hadn't been thinking about the long term, like if you only had one of these songs, which one would kind of give you more to dig from and more to learn from. Because if everything else is just about equal, as far as us coming to a unanimous decision, then I think digging a little bit deeper, that's what gets me over to your side of things.
Are you just saying that? Or are you...
No, like, just so you don't think I'm just saying this, like, sometimes for me, just talking through stuff triggers more thoughts in my head and kind of gets me to compare things in a different way, coming from a different approach. And I really do think that I'm going to have to go with Good News First.
Well, I'm glad I stuck to my guns. Because like I said, I do love the Big Wheel. I will always enjoy listening to the Big Wheel. But I am happy that you came to the Good News First side, and we've finally come to our decision of Good News First as winning out this week. That was hard.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I love about this project, is that because we can't tie, it forces us to approach things in different ways and dig deep on what it is about the songs that keeps us coming back to them.
Yeah, and that was a really cool discussion to dig deeper. And we encourage you guys to do the same thing, to dig deeper with some of these songs that you may not like right away, or maybe you do and you find something new with them. And we look forward to hearing your decision of the Big Wheel or Good News First.
Yeah, and before we end this episode, I just wanted to call back to last week's episode, Double Agent versus Spindrift. And in thinking about that more and listening to both songs again and more and just digging deeper on both songs, I still have to say that Spindrift for me is the one, because there was a really great episode of deep dives that Rush fans came out with. Like I said before, a lot of you are probably here because of Rush fans. But for those of you who aren't, Rush Fans does another video series called Deep Dives with Ryan Murphy and a panel of people where they dive deep onto all the Rush albums. They started with their last one and they've been working backwards, and they just did Counterparts, and they have a great discussion there. And Ryan talks about Double Agent. And so there was some more food for thought there. even with reflecting on those things more, because it was a shorter discussion last week, and I kind of thought, oh man, did we rush to a decision with all this?
To a decision.
And even with all that,
A thorough discussion.
it was a good opportunity for me to just reflect on that. And I think what does it for me with Spindrift is I get very fired up about the things that are talked about in Spindrift, as far as lack of communication and kind of that hopeless feeling where you have two different schools of thought that are competing, and just how do you still continue to coexist if it feels like the other side is not listening to you and it feels like it's a hopeless situation. And I think that Spindrift does a really great job at exploring that topic. And so just my personal preference is that discussion. But go and listen to that deep dive. You'll gain an even greater appreciation for Double Agent. And I'm just really glad that there are a lot of people in this space that talk about Rush. You have a lot of different avenues to gain appreciation for these songs, because like we say over and over, our whole point in doing this is getting you guys to go and listen to more Rush.
And with that, we will wrap this up, and next week we will be battling out Neurotica versus Anagram.
So thank you for your time, and we will look forward to having that discussion with you next week on the Rush Discussion.